The Korean
You
Mafia
are
boss
mine.
husband ignored his black wife for
No one
years,
else can take
until
you from
jealousy
me.
made him wild. I never planned to marry a monster. That's what they called him behind closed doors: monster, ghost, shadow. To his face, they called him Mr. Park. I called him husband, though most days he didn't bother to answer. My name is Amara Jones. For 6 years, I was the wife of Park Ji-hoon, the man whose name made Seoul's most dangerous men bow their heads and avert their eyes. The man whose single phone call could erase a person from existence. The man who wore tailored suits to cover the dragon tattoo that wrapped around his torso, each scale representing a debt paid in blood. I loved him before I knew what he was. That was my first mistake. In the beginning, there were glimpses of humanity. Moments when his eyes would soften at the corners. When his hands, those hands that had broken bones and signed death warrants, would trace my collarbone with something like reverence. Back then, he would whisper my name in the dark like a prayer. Back then, I believed I was the exception to his cruelty. I held onto that illusion longer than I should have. As a black woman in Seoul, I was already accustomed to being the outsider. I had learned to bear the stares, to smile through the uncomfortable questions, to pretend not to notice when old women clutched their purses tighter on the subway. I had crafted armor from my dignity long before I met Ji-hoon. But being his wife, that was a different kind of isolation. At first, I thought it was protection when he insisted I use his driver. When he hired staff to maintain our penthouse. When he suggested I focus on cultural studies instead of building my translation business. It wasn't until the 3rd year of our marriage that I recognized my gilded cage for what it was. Another territory he had claimed. The wives of his associates watched me with a mixture of pity and fear. Their perfectly maintained faces never betrayed emotion, but their eyes followed me at gatherings. The black American woman who had somehow captured the untouchable Park Ji-hoon. They measured the distance between us at dinner tables, noted how he rarely touched me in public, counted how many times he looked at his phone instead of me. He is a traditional man, one wife told me, her voice soft and careful. Korean men of power are not demonstrative. Her designer bracelet clinked against her glass as she leaned closer. But at least he doesn't keep mistresses like the others. At least he gives you respect. Respect. As if silence was respect. As if absence was fidelity. As if being displayed like an exotic acquisition at business functions was honor. Ji-hoon wasn't cruel, that would have been easier. Cruelty has shape. It gives you something to fight against. No, he was indifferent in a way that felt calculated, as if marriage was another business arrangement he maintained with efficient detachment. He never raised his voice to me. He never brought his brutality home. He simply never brought himself home either. I stopped waiting up when business kept him out until dawn. Stopped asking about the blood I sometimes spotted on his shirt cuffs. Stopped wondering why certain names disappeared from conversation, why properties suddenly changed hands, why his inner circle shifted without explanation. I learned to live in the periphery of his world, watching from behind the safety glass he'd installed between us. Love doesn't die in an explosion. It erodes, steadily, silently, until one day you realize you're standing on a foundation that no longer exists. The night I understood I was alone in my marriage wasn't dramatic. No argument, no revelation, just a moment so ordinary its significance terrified me. We were at home, our penthouse overlooking the Han River. The city spread before us like a glittering circuit board. I was barefoot in our kitchen, making the spicy jollof rice my grandmother had taught me, because though we had a chef, sometimes I needed to remember who I was before Seoul, before Park Ji-hoon. He walked in, suit jacket discarded, scrolling through his phone. He glanced at the pot, then at me. You're cooking. Not a question. Not a compliment. Just a flat observation. My grandmother's recipe, I offered, a small fishing hook of conversation. He nodded once, already turning away. I ate with the Japanese delegation. 6 words. That was all I was worth after being alone for 3 days. Ji-hoon, I said, my voice catching. Could we talk? About anything. Just talk. He paused, frowning slightly like I'd presented him with an invoice in the wrong currency. About what? And that was when I knew. Standing in our kitchen with a wooden spoon in my hand, the smell of my childhood filling a space that had never felt like home. I realized I had become a ghost in my own life. I had no answer for him. There was nothing to talk about because we shared nothing but an address. I stayed another year after that. Not because I hoped things would change, but because leaving a man like Park Ji-hoon wasn't as simple as packing bags and calling a lawyer. Men in his position didn't get divorced, they got widowed. Women who displeased them didn't walk away, they disappeared. At least, that's what I told myself as fear calcified around my heart. Fear of starting over in a country where I would always be an outsider. Fear of what he might do if I damaged his pristine image. Fear that perhaps this hollow existence was all I deserved. But dignity, once buried, has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. The catalyst came during a rare dinner where Ji-hoon actually attended. One of his captains made a joke, something crude about black women and submission. The table fell silent. All eyes turned to Ji-hoon, waiting for his reaction, waiting to see if he would defend his wife or join the laughter. He did neither. He simply took a sip of soju and changed the subject, as if the insult had been nothing more than a draft through an open window. I sat there, smile frozen on my face, heat climbing my neck, the familiar weight of swallowed rage sitting in my throat, and something inside me, something vital and buried, finally broke free. That night, I contacted an American divorce attorney who specialized in international cases. I didn't tell her who my husband was. I didn't have to. The tremble in my voice told her everything she needed to know. I need this to be careful, I said. He's a powerful man. They all are, honey, she replied, until they're not. It took 3 months of meticulous planning. 3 months of deleting browser histories, of speaking in code to my few remaining friends, of transferring small amounts to an overseas account, of preparing to abandon everything I couldn't carry in one suitcase. The day I left, I wore a white dress and flat shoes, practical for what might become running. I carried nothing that he had given me except the thick envelope of one I'd been saving from my allowance. No jewelry, no designer clothes, nothing that could be interpreted as theft. I left a letter on his desk in both English and Korean, though his English was flawless. I wanted no misunderstandings. Ji-hoon, I am leaving our marriage. There will be divorce papers. I ask nothing from you except freedom. I have taken nothing that wasn't mine before we met. I will tell no one about your business. I just want to go. Amara. No accusations. No emotions. The language of transaction, the only dialect he truly understood. I took a taxi to a hotel in Itaewon, where foreigners blended in, where I had paid cash for a room under a different name. I sat on the bed, hands shaking, waiting for the hammer to fall, waiting for his men to break down the door, drag me back to the penthouse, remind me that I didn't make the decisions in our relationship. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts, no digital footprint of his reaction. 3 days later, my attorney contacted me. He's agreed to the divorce, she said, sounding surprised. No contest, no claims, no conditions except a non-disclosure agreement about his professional activities. I almost laughed. Even in divorce, Park Ji-hoon maintained his efficient detachment. He was letting me go the way one releases a bird that no longer sings, with casual disinterest. The divorce was processed with mechanical precision. His lawyers handled everything with the same cold efficiency that characterized their employer. I kept nothing but my freedom and the small savings I'd squirreled away. I declined any settlement. I wanted no threads binding me to him, no reason for him to ever think of me again. For the first time in years, I breathed without measuring each inhale. I found a small apartment in a neighborhood where few of his associates would venture. I rebuilt my translation business, specializing in helping foreign companies navigate Korean business culture, the official kind, not the shadow economy I'd glimpsed from the edges of my marriage. And slowly, carefully, I reclaimed pieces of myself. I laughed louder. I wore colors Ji-hoon had deemed impractical. I made friends who knew nothing about my past. I ate street food without worrying about appearances. I dated casually, never seriously, never deeply, never with Korean men who reminded me of sharp suits and sharper silences, until David Kim walked into my life. It happened at a business mixer I almost skipped. Old habits die hard, and part of me still flinched at rooms full of powerful men. But my newest client had insisted, and I needed the contract. Unlike the gatherings of my married life, this was legitimate business, tech entrepreneurs, foreign investors, corporate executives. No subtle undercurrent of violence. No men who disappeared to back rooms for conversations that made the air heavy. He approached with a directness that startled me, hand extended, smile reaching his eyes. "David Kim," he said in perfect English. "You must be Amara Jones. Your reputation precedes you." I shook his hand, automatically scanning for threats. "All good things, I hope. The best. You saved Gene Tech from a cultural disaster with that contract translation." His eyes, warm, without the flat calculation I'd grown accustomed to, crinkled at the corners. "They said you caught nuances even their Korean-American staff missed." For the first time in years, professional pride straightened my spine. "Language is about context as much as content," I replied. "Especially in business Korean." "I know," he said, switching to Korean so flawless it startled me. "I was born here but raised in Chicago. Came back 10 years ago to start my company. I still sometimes miss cultural cues." We talked for hours. Not the careful, performative conversations I'd endured at Ji-hoon's side, but real exchange. He asked questions and waited for answers. He laughed at my observations about expatriate life. He shared stories about straddling two cultures, belonging fully to neither. By the end of the evening, I had forgotten to be vigilant. I had forgotten to scan the room for faces I recognized from my past life. I had forgotten everything except the novel sensation of being seen, truly seen, by a Korean man who carried no shadows in his smile. When he asked for my business card, I hesitated only briefly before handing it over. When he called 2 days later to request a coffee meeting to discuss potential collaboration, I agreed with only minor trepidation. What I didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Park Ji-hoon had never truly let me go. That while he had released me from our marriage with cold efficiency, he had kept me in his peripheral vision. That his network of eyes and ears throughout Seoul had noted my new apartment, my rebuilt business, my cautious emergence into independence. And that seeing me laugh with another Korean man would wake something in him that had slept through our entire marriage. David and I moved slowly. He respected my reticence, never pushed for explanations about my past, seemed content to build something careful and deliberate. He was everything Ji-hoon was not: expressive, present, unguarded in his interest. "You carry yourself like someone who's been through war,"